I was about to turn the camera off and realize there was something I meant to say here at the top of the video, which is that if you read a book that you would like to recommend from Women in Translation Month, look in the description box for details on how to contact me, and you have the opportunity to send me a really short description. It'll take you, less than 10 minutes, and then be part of all the compiled entries that we've gotten. I've had some really fun entries so far, and I'd love to hear from more people, both those who already have bookish platforms and those who don't. Everybody is welcome. So details in the description box, and I hope to hear from some of you by this Sunday, September 6th. Hi guys, I was having my dinner of nachos and wine, and I suddenly thought, I miss BookTube. I want to make a video. So here I am on camera with my big hair to talk about some of the biggest books on my TBR. I do say biggest instead of longest deliberately because, these are fairly long, most of them, but some of them also, they're just taller than the average book and wider, and their font size is small and their margins are very thin, and some of them are masquerading as 500 to 600 page books, and you open them up and you immediately know that it's not going to be a 500 page experience. So I recently came back to my New York apartment and have been getting reacquainted with my bookshelf. It's really nice. And I thought I would pull these off and talk to you about them because right now, when I look at each of them on the shelf, they're identifying features that they're big. And I'd just like to remind myself of why I have them on my shelves in the first place. And, so by grouping them all together and saying, okay, all of these are big, but let me talk about them individually, I hope that the next time I look at each of them, that their identifying features will be those specific reasons I want to read them. I think also, as I was just getting at, that there can be a mental block sometimes with books that we perceive as big. But then there are certain other books that, even though objectively, they are really long, I don't have that mental block, and so I have two of those to mention right at the top here. The first is Fool's Assassin by Robin Hobb. This is getting toward the end of her Realm of the Elderling series. It's the first and the final trilogy. This is over 600 pages, and I think books 2 and 3 are both over 800 pages, but I just fly through these, so even having it on this list feels a little weird. And then the other one is The Way We Live Now by Anthony Trollope in this great Modern Library edition. And technically this is over 820-ish pages, but reading Trollope is just so easy. It's so easy and so fun. I recently read Framley Parsonage, which is part of his Chronicles of Barsetshire, and it was about 650 pages. I read it in less than a week without even having to make an effort. So it would feel mildly preposterous not to put a book that looks like this on a big books list, but I'm just not intimidated by it at all. The only downside to this beautiful edition that my roommate gave me is that the introduction is by David Brooks, and just what a dour and unimaginative writer he is, and especially, introducing Trollope, who's just one of the most effortlessly insightful authors I can think of. The contrast is a bit insane to me, but clearly not to the people who commission for the Modern Library. I'm just thinking that because of starting with those two, I want to be careful about the language framework I'm creating here, because I don't want to necessarily separate the ideas of work and fun. And a good example of that is that I read the Iliad for the first time this summer, and it definitely took a certain level of dedication to keep going with it, but I loved it. It was such an amazing reading experience. And I'm hoping that combination of fun and work will be similar. Maybe tentatively hopeful is a more accurate way of putting that, because this is Virgil's Aeneid translated from Latin by Robert Fagles. I read the Fagles translations for the Odyssey and the Iliad, and they really worked for me, but I'll talk about those more in a future video. But I know a lot more, or I knew a lot more about Homer going into those poems, whereas I don't know much about Virgil or the framework of this book. So even though it's only about 400 pages, it's going to take me a level of concentration and doing a bit of extra research, and also just spending more time with it per page than I would with a lot of other books, which is why I'm putting it on this list. The next three are big Russian classics, all translated by Richard Pevear and Larissa Volokhonsky, which was not intentional on my part. I got all three of these books in different circumstances over the years and didn't always pay attention to the translator, but considering that their version of Anna Karenina is one of my favorite books, I think they're safe to lead me through these, and then I can explore other Russian translators later. So the first one of these is Dostoevsky's The Idiot, which I know begins in a Swiss sanatorium, and then the protagonist goes back to St. Petersburg, and there's scandal and murder, and I don't know much else about it, to be honest, and I don't want to know too much about the plot. This is about 630 pages, but honestly, this is more of a font situation that's putting it on this list because, good God, like, ready your monocle for this. I've only read Dostoevsky's first epistolary novel, Poor Times. Am I mixing that up with Dickens? No, Dickens is Hard Times, Poor People. It's some combination of Hard Times, Poor Times, and Poor People. I think it's Poor People. Clearly it left a lasting impression. So I haven't read any of Dostoevsky's major work, which is criminal for somebody who's interested in Russian classics. Then I have Dr. Zhivago, and again, I have a hazy idea of the plot. I think that's one of the fun things about classics is sort of, for me, going in without necessarily reading the jacket descriptions, just having an impression on them based on like the way that they're represented in popular culture and the way other people speak about them, and then just discovering all the very weird and specific things that weren't conveyed to you through popular culture. But I just thought I wasn't going to read the jacket copy, and I don't want to. But what I do know about this is that it's about a man who's both a doctor and a poet. So not too many of those anymore. And he becomes involved against his will in the Russian Revolution. And I do know that this was first published in the 1950s, but was only permitted to be published in the Soviet Union, I think, at the end of the 1980s. So it has a very interesting life as a book, just outside of the text itself. And what's special about this edition is that it was given to me by my high school English teacher when I graduated. So I should really thank her properly and read it. Oh, I think I forgot to say, this is only about 500 pages, but again, tall book, wide book, small font, small margins. It's just a quadruple whammy there. And then the last Russian classic I have that's huge for now is Tolstoy's War and Peace, which is 1,200 pages. But truthfully, of all the books on this big books list, this may be the least intimidating to me, and it's because I mean, it is heavy though, so I'm going to put it down. But Anna Karenina is so readable. It's just such an experience, and it pulls you along, and it really sweeps you up in this combination of characters, plot, and broader themes, in the way that all of those things are just woven together perfectly. And I love just that mix of epic and intimate that Tolstoy is known for. So I think it's just a matter of deciding at some point next year, okay, this is the month that I read War and Peace. The only contemporary literary fiction I have on here is The Luminaries by Eleanor Catton, which is over 800 pages. It is 19th century New Zealand Gold Rush Zodiac Man Booker winner. That's my mood board, my mental mood board for this book. And again, sorry to be a broken record here, but I don't need to know much more. I've heard people praise this book, and enough people with disparate taste that I'm just intrigued by what kind of book could be beloved by them all. Next is 3 nonfiction books. First we have this 700-page beast, Frédéric Chopin, A Life and Times by Alan Walker. This was a gift from Steve. You can't really see the cover details there. This is a real Steve move, actually, to go up close to the camera. So there you go, little involuntary tribute. I think the only thing that's kept me from reading this is that it's 700 pages, truthfully, because I'm fascinated by Chopin's life. And the few times that I've actually opened this book up and started reading, it's been really delightful. And there are always these little musical asides within it, which I think is interesting. And I mean, I have far from an encyclopedic knowledge of, the great composers. But as a singer, I always loved Fauré the most. But as a pianist, Chopin was my man. Especially Chopin waltzes. I just could practice them endlessly. Just even talking about this book, like, it kind of makes me want to start reading it right now. And I truly can't because I have so much work reading at the moment and a lot of other books that I've committed to reviewing for open letters. So I'm going to put this to the side. This is actually like dangerous territory for me right now. The Warmth of Other Suns by Isabel Wilkerson is only 550 pages, but it's one of those like tall and wide suspects on this list. This won the Pulitzer Prize and was a bestseller and has just been praised from top to bottom, deservedly so from everything that I've heard. It follows 3 people to tell the broader story of the migration of African Americans in the 20th century to the West, the Midwest, and the North. And that tying of historical narratives to personal narratives can go belly up really, really quickly. But from everything that I've heard, this is a masterful example of that. And when it's done well, it can be just so incredibly impactful. The last big nonfiction book is Proust Duchess by Caroline Weber, which is about 600 pages before the notes section. And this is a case where I don't think I ever would have picked this up just based on the description, but I heard an interview with the author and it was fabulous. It's just such a fabulous interview because she was describing the lives of 3 women who lived in turn-of-the-century Paris and how in their different ways they inspired a major character in Proust's In Search of Lost Time. And this is one of those books, again, where, I mean, I've done this a few times since I was really kindly sent this by the publisher, and I flip through and I'll skim a few paragraphs and I'm instantly drawn in. It just has that sort of magnetic quality to it. So again, this is very positive because it makes me feel like I really should stop inventing excuses to put it off. The last book to highlight before I just go even more beet red and die without my fan on is The Complete Stories of Flannery O'Connor, which is about 550 pages. And it's just the fact of a collection of short stories being that length that I think has kept me from starting it. Because I've read a number of Flannery O'Connor stories in isolation, but never a whole collection of hers, let alone the complete stories. And the way that they're compiled here is that it just goes from one story to the next. There's no, chronological delineation. There's like no thematic grouping or anything. There's no part 1, part 2, part 3. So I think I've just had this idea that I would get to page, 250 and put it down for a few months and feel like a failure when that's just makes no sense to me, because what would be failing about that? Actually, that might be a fantastic way to read this, would be in different chunks instead of treating every book like it needs to be read the same and just from start to finish all within a week or 2. Okay, did you see me? I'm like trying to talk myself into this because, I mean, I hesitate being overconfident about this, but I do feel pretty confident that I'm gonna love this. So I've just mentioned 11 books, and I think before the end of the year, I would like to read 4. Right now, the very, very optimistic part of me is thinking I could read more than that. But the realistic part, sitting on the other shoulder, is saying that I have so much work reading. Work reading is really gonna take me through October at least, and then there are only 2 months of the year left, and I will be reading other books as well. So 4 out of 11 is a pretty good goal, and I guess I'll check back at the end of the year and let you know if it happens. So thanks for spending this time with me, you guys. I'd love to hear what big books you have on your shelves, and whether or not you're still excited to read them, or if you sort of need to go through the process of getting reacquainted with them to feel excited again. Thanks again, and I'll see you soon for another video.